Alright, so Derrick Lewis just knocked out Tallison Teixeira at UFC Nashville, and this only confirms that the heavyweight division is in the worst state that it's been in for years, possibly ever. This was for sure the worst case scenario for the division that's desperately in need of new blood. It is no secret that heavyweight has been on the decline for a while now, and the fact that a 40-year-old Derrick Lewis just wiped out a 25-year-old prospect who, let's be real here, was the only interesting up-and-coming guy at heavyweight doesn't paint a very good picture for the future of the division. And if Lewis, who was 2-4 in his last 6 fights and barely even tries half the time, is starching a hot young prospect in 30 seconds, then that says a lot more about the state of the division than it does about Derrick himself. Although I'm a pretty big believer that the sport of MMA has progressed rapidly over the last decade or so, where the general skill level of all the divisions has increased, I can't say that's been the case for heavyweight. And of course, Tom Aspinall is an excellent fighter, and I do think that the top 5 contenders are all legitimately good as well, but after that, there is a very significant drop-off in terms of talent. And yeah, in this video, I'm going to be talking about all this and more. So this is usually where I'd say, but first let's talk about the fight itself, but there's really not much to talk about when it comes to Lewis versus Teixeira. Derrick was able to drop him with a left hook just seconds into the opening round. Tallison had to grab onto the cage with both hands in order to stand up, and Jason Herzog stopped the fight as he was on his feet. There's been some discourse about whether or not this was an early stoppage, but honestly, I'm pretty okay with the decision to call the fight, seeing as Teixeira had to rock climb his way up the cage in order to escape being on bottom. I do agree that it seemed like he wasn't rocked all that badly, and he probably did have the wherewithal to get back into the fight, but there's just no way that a ref can allow a fighter who just got knocked down to grab the cage like that in order to get back to a standing position. Does that necessarily mean he should have stopped the fight then and there? I guess he could have taken a point without calling a stop to the action and let the fight play out a little bit more, but the combination of him getting rocked on top of the egregious cheating makes it hard for me to feel sympathetic for Teixeira in this case. Would I have personally liked to have seen Tallison try and fight his way back? Sure, but I also like that Herzog didn't reward the blatant foul with pussyfooting officiating that's become way too common in the sport these days. With that out of the way, when is heavyweight gonna become great again, people? Tallison Teixeira was supposed to lead the way for a new era of heavyweight contenders. He's 25 years old, 6'8", and had knocked out all of his opponents in the very first round, and yet here he is getting knocked out in the first round by Derrick Lewis, who's the oldest guy in the heavyweight top 15. And now that Tallison needs to work to get his stock back up for a while, who else is there that can shake up the division? Pull up the official UFC heavyweight rankings right now, and I dare you not to laugh. It looks like someone used a random name generator, because for some of these guys, I actually need to take a second to remind myself who they are, even though I've seen all of them fight multiple times.
5+ years ago, just the name value in the top 15 was incredible. We're talking guys like Fabricio Verdun, Cain Velasquez, JDS, Mark Hunt, Alistair Overeem, Brock Lesnar, etc., etc. Like the list of Stipe, the list goes on and on and on. Like you look through the top 15 and you're just like, wow, that is incredible. Whereas now even me who's a heavyweight, I look through the top 15 and I'm like, I'm not really seeing him fight before, do you know what I mean? So
guys like Mick Parkin and Martin Boudet are considered up-and-coming guys, but I just don't think they're very good. Then you have Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak, who've been in the UFC for a while now, but we all know that they're middle-of-the-pack sort of guys at best. Somehow Tai Tuivasa, who's on a 5-fight losing streak, is ranked 10th, which is utterly criminal and really highlights how much of a joke the UFC rankings have become. This guy hasn't won a fight in 3 years, yet he's not only ranked, but supposedly a top 10 guy just because people like that he drinks beers out of shoes.
Bro, the heavyweights shit. They're all shit. Except for Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall.
Right.
Other than that, fucking everyone's pretty standard.
Even Riznan Kuniev being ranked number 15 is bizarre to me because he's 0-1 in the UFC. I will say that I think this guy is for sure a top 10 level fighter, seeing as he's clearly better than Tuivasa, but he definitely kind of got robbed in his last fight against Curtis Blades, so maybe Kuniev might be the guy that can inject a little bit of interest back into heavyweight. Even Waldo Cortez Acosta, who's fought his way to being ranked number 6, is crazy to me. Like, he doesn't look like he's that good when he actually fights. I'm not all that impressed by his resume, and even though he's on a 5-fight win streak, he has to be the least impressive guy ranked 6th in his weight class across the entire UFC. And now that I think about it, if we look at the top 5 guys, I feel like there's ample room for criticism there too. Cyril Gane is good, but that one next to his name feels pretty fraudulent, seeing as he definitely did not deserve that win against Volkov back in December. Sergey Pavlovich is back in the win column, but is still trying to regain a lot of his stock since losing to Aspinall and Volkov, who I really don't think he has much of a chance in beating if he was to rematch either of them. Curtis Blades, who I've always respected as being exceptionally well-rounded for a heavyweight, is noticeably starting to slow down. And Jailton Almeida is a weird case because he's very skilled, but I just don't think he's going to be very effective against the top of the division. Let's rewind to the golden era of heavyweight MMA, back when the division had legends stacked on top of legends. At one point in time, we had Cain Velasquez, Brock Lesnar, Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, Frank Mir, Shane Carwin, Josh Barnett, and many other notable names fighting at the same time. What happened? Look, I'm not necessarily saying that if you time traveled this division into 2025 that they would all immediately be top contenders, although I do think Prime Cain vs. Tom would be one of the dopest fights ever, but I do think that all of these guys would at least be top 15 for sure, and they'd stay there for a while. Now let's compare the top 10 bantamweight bantamweights from 2012 versus the current top 10. The only guy from 2012 that I think would be able to hang with the current roster would be Dominic Cruz. I mean, maybe Prime Faber and Prime Barao could crack today's top 10, but honestly, I think it's unlikely. Over the last 15 years, every other weight class has seen a dramatic evolution in terms of talent, technique, and athleticism. Even flyweight, which used to be the UFC's redheaded stepchild, now has very legitimate competition, whereas before it was a bunch of grocery store clerks who trained on the side. But heavyweight just feels like it's moving backwards. Half the fights still look like glorified bar brawls, fighters are still gassing out by the middle of round 2, and for the most part the ground game is non-existent, and I know that a lot of you guys like that, but I also kind of get the feeling that a lot of these heavyweights just don't train wrestling or jiu-jitsu at all. Let's go back to 2012. You had guys like Brock, who was a wrestler, JDS and Overeem were strikers, Frank Mir, Big Nog, and Josh Barnett were incredible grapplers, and then you had Kane and Shane, who were great at mixing striking and wrestling. Not only were the skill sets much more diverse back in the day, but they were also just more skilled than what we're seeing now. The heavyweights today that are ranked 6 and below just kind of stand in front of each other and wing punches, which can totally be fun to watch, but my point is their bags aren't as deep as the heavyweights that came before them. And I'm not going to pretend like it's such a mystery why heavyweights have gotten worse, because let's be real, elite athletes over 240 pounds don't choose to fight in the UFC. They go to the NFL, they go to the NBA, they go to the WWE, because almost everybody knows by now that the UFC pays like crap, and if you're an all-around physical specimen, why would you get paid UFC money when you can get paid NFL or NBA money? The guys that are 6'5" and 260 pounds who can also run a 4.7 40-yard dash are not going to put themselves through 10 years of training for a chance to make 20,000 to show and 20,000 to win. I'm sure at this point many of you guys are assuming that I'm probably going to blame the current state of heavyweight on Dana White, but you know what? You're right. Well, kind of, because on one hand, there's just no way around the fact that the biggest, most athletic guys of the world are going to gravitate towards sports where the earning potential can be like 50 times what they'd make while being an MMA fighter. Especially with how established basketball and football are, it's just not practical for guys that can go pro in those sports to pursue MMA. But if Dana actually paid these professional athletes more and gave them proper incentive to consider MMA, then maybe we wouldn't get tier 1 sort of athletes, but we'd probably be able to convince the guys that couldn't quite make it to the NFL or NBA or WWE to consider the UFC. We don't need a roster full of LeBron Jameses and Ben Roethlisbergers to make heavyweight interesting. It would be awesome to see that level of athleticism fighting in the UFC, but shit, I'd settle for NFL benchwarmer guys any day of the week. But that's the thing, an NFL rookie is making at least $800,000 a year. An NBA rookie is making at least $1.1 million a year. The average NBA salary is over $11 million a year. Just based on these numbers alone, why on earth would an extremely athletic big man try and fight in the UFC knowing he's going to barely be scraping by for years before he ever makes it to the top of the sport, and even then he's going to be making less than an NBA player who plays 12 minutes per game. And if a big athletic dude does want to pursue combat sports, then boxing makes way more sense than MMA. I do agree that there is a misconception that low-tier boxers make more than low-tier MMA fighters, but the top-tier boxers are making so much more than the top MMA fighters, it's not even a comparison. Like Francis Ngannou got paid more to get knocked out by Anthony Joshua than Tom Aspinall has made in his entire UFC career, and if this quick Google search is at all accurate, Ngannou's $20 million against Joshua is equal to what Jon Jones has made throughout Jon's entire UFC career. Then take into consideration the $10 million he made when he fought Fury, Francis made over $25 million more in 2 boxing fights than he did in 7 years of fighting in the UFC. Even if we're talking about actual boxers, Derek Chisora is a heavyweight that, from what I understand, is a bit of a journeyman sort of fighter. In spite of that, he earned 4.5 million pounds, which is $6 million USD, just to get rolled by Tyson Fury. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? By all accounts, by every measurable factor, it is completely and utterly impractical to pursue a career as a UFC heavyweight. The pay is dog shit, and the only way to attract better talent to this faltering division is to pay fighters much more, and Dana's ass will never allow that. And as I look at this division, I can't help but think of how much of a moron Dana was for letting Francis leave. Ultimately, it was best for Francis that he got away from the terror tomato, and I'm happy for him for that, but now that heavyweight is the way that it is, I really wish that Dana could have conceded on at least some of Ngannou's contract requests. Who knows how many more fights he would have done in the UFC, and who knows how long he would have stayed champion, but at the very least, we probably would have seen Francis versus Tom by now, and seeing as Jon Jones went running for the hills at the idea of fighting Aspinall, it just feels like we were robbed of like 2 or 3 heavyweight super fights. It's not entirely Dana or the UFC's fault that the bigger sports can pay bigger money, but his greedy petty ass is definitely not helping solve the issue at hand. The UFC heavyweight division is the least interesting it's ever been. It's the only division in the UFC that has regressed over the years. It's plagued by laziness, mismanagement, and a total lack of urgency from the people in charge. The fighters are getting older, the new blood isn't good enough, and the matchups all look the same. Fix it, Dana, or at the very least, pretend like you care again. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about the heavyweight division. Do you agree that the division sucks now, and what do you think could be done to improve it? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
I think you have very well painted the picture, though, of a division in shambles.
Shambles.
A division that needs an injection of talent. To me, there's two quick solves. There are two fights out there that I think make a lot of sense and would instantly solve the problem that the UFC heavyweight division has. And there's not Jon Jones not included.
Yeah.
Number one, Alex Pereira.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That fight has not been booked yet, right? The rematch between Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev.
That is correct. That is
scrap that immediately.
It's not official.
I know Alex Pereira wants that fight, and I imagine that that's what's going to happen. But he's so much more valuable to the heavyweight division than he would be to light heavyweight at this point.